Hi everyone. Welcome to ASM Hour. This is my first video on the channel, and I'd like to use it to share some things with you that are dear to me. I've always been a fan of Marvel Comics, right from when I was a kid in the late 80s, early 90s. And far before the films came out, I was buying X-Men, Spider-Man, Silver Surfer. I loved the fantastical world that these comics offered that allowed me to escape for a little while. And in my sort of obsession with the superheroes, I began collecting cards from different card series of Marvel. And my favorite of all time to this day are the 1992 Marvel masterpieces. And not too long ago, I was able to acquire what I believe to be is the full set, including the holographic cards, including the rare ones that don't usually come as a part of the set. And I wanted to share those with you today and share with you what I like about them, what intrigues me, some of my favorite characters. So I hope you'll go on this journey with me. I've tried to go through and alphabetize all of these by the character name, just so that if I want to take a look at a character, I can easily get back to them. One of the things I love most about these cards is they captured my imagination as a child. The Marvel movies were a very far cry from being shown to us, and at the time I felt like these were some of the best representations we could get of these amazing characters. And they're so vibrant and colorful. Starting with the character Adam Warlock here. I had seen him in a couple of my Silver Surfer comics, but to see him drawn there, just like ready for battle and in outer space with the greens, the colors are so rich. The maroon, the black, even his stark blonde hair with the cape. To me, it's like it's just coming off the page or coming off the card. And Apocalypse, he was always one of my favorite Marvel villains. It's just an interesting take. This isn't my favorite take of how he's been drawn, but he still is very menacing. And I remember when I was a kid, I sort of had a fear of Apocalypse because he was just so impersonal and ancient. And he was like an ancient evil. And yeah, I think the artist here, Joe Jusko, what's unique, I think, about this set is he's done every single one of these cards. Every single one of the cards in this set was done by him. And I just love his larger-than-life interpretation. And then we get to Archangel, who was one of the 4 horsemen that was under Apocalypse. And I don't know, it's just so cool. I mean, he seems so victorious and triumphant. And just how like the gleam and the shininess of his costume, the colors are so rich and vibrant. Like today you see an LCD or LED monitor and the colors pop. But back in 1992, we obviously didn't have those. And so this was like as HD as you could get with these characters. And then we move on to Beast. Beast was always interesting. He was never my favorite, but I always thought it was so cool how smart he was. And here I think this really captures him, like he's in some other dimension, as the X-Men usually were. And there's like so much detail to all of his fur, and again, just that concept of larger than life. And Bishop, he was always a really cool character. I thought they had a really nice angle with his time travel. Here, it's like he's stepped out of the time portal and he's ready for business. And then Black Cat, one of the famous characters from the Spider-Man universe, the sort of on again, off again relationship with Peter Parker. I always just loved how they did the cityscape and how they make the moon. Even though the moon isn't realistic here, it still gives like a magical comic book sheen to the whole thing. It's very moody, and I love how he does colors. The famous Black Panther. Many of you probably know him from many of the Marvel films, but he was very much his own thing in the comics, far before the movies. I'm not particularly fond of this interpretation of him, but I still think it's really cool just to see him brought to life in this way. Black Widow, as we all know from the Marvel films, how cool of a job that Scarlett did. But back in the comics days, she was a villain in many respects. In her ties with the Soviet Russia, and but I always thought this was so cool here, the stark orange. You know, she had run-ins with Spider-Man and Daredevil. And the character Blaze, I believe this was Johnny Blaze. I believe that one of the Johnny Blazes was Ghost Rider, but my memory isn't serving me too well at the moment. I always thought it was just so cool how badass he looks. He was like something out of a 1980s film, almost like a mix between Terminator and Renegade or something. Really cool. I remember getting this card when I was back in grade school trading for this. Here we have Blob. I always thought he was such a goofy character, but this definitely shows what his powers are of his absorption through his fat. And Bullseye, he was, if you'd ever seen the Daredevil film with Ben Affleck, I know he was portrayed by Colin Farrell. This definitely illustrates his power of almost never missing. Then we have Cable. This isn't my favorite interpretation of Cable, but I definitely think Cable was made into a really cool character. I think this kind of shows, you know, he's known for his weapons and things like that. in addition to his time travel, the whole Summers timeline, Scott Summers and Jean Grey. And then Cage. I know that Cage had a show. That was the Marvel show that they had. I never really saw it, but Cage did have some run-ins with Spider-Man, I believe, in a few comics. Then there's the ever-famous Captain America that we all know and love from the Marvel films. I always found him kind of a boring character in the comics, honestly. I felt he was a little too goody two-shoes. But in the case of the Marvel films, I think he did an excellent job. The name is escaping me. I can't even remember. Chris. I can't remember. My mind's a blank. But I thought that the character portrayal in the Marvel films of Steve Rogers really gave him more color than I felt he had in the comics, and really brought him to life and made me love him more as a character, just for his morals and his ethics. So that was really cool. Captain Britain. I don't know too much about him. I know that he had a lot of appearances. What was the Avengers team in the UK? I know he worked with like Nightcrawler, Psylocke. Don't really know much about him. And this is kind of an okay portrayal. I was never a huge fan, but this portrayal here of Colossus, I think, is so cool. I don't know, there's just something about the silver in his costume. This is very much like a throwback to the 80s, and he's just showing how strong he is. It's really cool. I came to like Colossus a lot as a character. I think he was pretty neat. In Cyclops, I was never a huge fan of him, but I absolutely love the color scheme of this here, with like the green nebula. Like, where is he? Is he in a different part of the galaxy fighting some alien race? How cool his optic blast is. His very 90s, 80s-esque costume. Yeah, the color scheme, it just pops. And this is really cool too. This Daredevil, it's so moody. With him in the wintertime, in Hell's Kitchen. It really, I would really like this as a painting, I think. Like on my wall. I just think Jusko has this way of just capturing a mood. And in my view, when you can say a lot with just one picture, I just think it's really great. And of course, Daredevil had the movie and the series and such. So the TV series. But I just thought it was cool. His interactions he had, Kingpin and Spider-Man. And here's a character, Darkhawk. I never knew much about Darkhawk. I knew he had some run-ins with Spider-Man before. And he always seemed like kind of a cool character to me, but I never had any of his comics. And I don't think he's been portrayed yet in any new series. I've been told that they may do some kind of an adaptation of him, but for now all we have is his comic appearances. I think he might have had some run-ins with Moon Knight, if I'm not mistaken, but yeah, this is really cool. And I love this interpretation of Dazzler. I mean, this is amazing to me. I mean, the colors, he just loves colors so much, and I love how he really just brings to life Dazzler's colors here. It's just great. And Deathlock, I never knew much about Deathlock. I think, wasn't he a reincarnated soldier, something like that. I've been told he might have some appearances in upcoming series, or may have a series of his own on the way, but I'm not sure. To be quite honest, I sort of haven't kept up with the Marvel Cinematic Universe or the TV shows since after the Avengers films. But yeah, I think this is really cool. It has a very Terminator-esque vibe to it. And then the infamous Doctor Doom. I think they make Doom, he's such a badass character. And it's like he's in a spaceship here, you know. Typical hyper-intelligent Doctor Doom. It's really cool. It just shows his intimidatingness and his lust for power. It's very cool. And Dr. Octopus, I always thought he had such a goofy costume. And I think he was actually better portrayed in the movies than he is in the comics. But it just, you know, again, these paintings, because as I understand it, Joe Jusko, these were all paintings that he made. And I think it's a neat take. It's not my favorite, but it's pretty cool. On to Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange is probably one of my top 3 favorite Marvel characters. And I'm not a fan of this interpretation so much. I felt he could have done better if he did something with, you know, all of his magic that he has. But I still think it's cool to have this card of him. I have a number of his comics, and when I found out that they were doing a movie of him, I was just over the moon. And it was just double cool to me that it was actually a pretty decent film. So there we go. Dormammu, the infamous villain, one of Doctor Strange's archenemies. I never knew much about Dormammu, but I find it fascinating, you know, the dimension that he lives in, and the eternal flame and such. But this is really cool. I don't have any Doctor Strange comics with him in it, but I think this is a really cool, again, the colors pop. This one's really cool with Electro. I think this really harkens back to his early costumes from, what was it, the 60s? Late 60s, I believe, when they first introduced him to Spider-Man, if memory serves correct. But again, these colors, they pop. I just love that Joe Jusko was not afraid to use the color, right? To even if it was corny, he's like, I'm gonna make these heroes and villains larger than life. So that's really cool. Elektra, I know she was very intertwined in, you know, Daredevil's universe, and I know she was portrayed in the Ben Affleck film. I'm not really sure if she's had any more. I know she had a movie by herself as well. But yeah, this one's pretty cool. Again, very moody. I always like the moodiness, you know, New York City, the hand, all that stuff. Next we have Enchantress. I think this is just a really cool, you know, provocative kind of enchantress, portraying her kind of how she was in the comics, you know, within Thor's universe. And I just think it's amazing having like the planets and the stars outside the bedroom with the opulence of the grapes and such. You know, again, those colors, they bring these worlds to life. And yeah, it's a really cool interpretation of her. And then the great Galactus. He is probably my second favorite Marvel character of all time. I've always loved Galactus and his story, you know, being one of the three entities of the universe between infinity and eternity. And I like that his story where he has to consume planets to stay alive. And he does destroy entire races of planets. And people think of him as a villain, but he's actually tried to explain that he's doing his duty for the universe that he needs to do. And he'll return to the universe, manyfold from which he took, as he once said. So, I don't know, he's just one of my favorites. He's just so grand and cosmic. I love it. Gambit, he's also probably one of my, if I had a top 10 list, he's definitely in there. Such a cool, suave, badass kind of guy. I'm not really a fan of how they did this. I think his face looks a little weird. But I definitely think it was cool to have, the mysterious eyes and the bow staff. And, he's got the cigarette. In the 90s, he was always known for, his sort of badass character. And, obviously today we couldn't do this, but, back in the 90s, that was a thing. So he's got his cigarette, just illustrating how cool he is, And Ghost Rider, I always found him an interesting character. I don't know his background too much. I know there was like something with the Midnight Suns. He's got a lot of stuff to do with Hell and Mephisto within, the Marvel Universe. But I think this is just a really cool interpretation. He's just jumping out of the card. I think just Jusko does this in a way that I don't think people do this anymore. This is what I love about it. These are very much a product of their own time. And then on to Green Goblin. I was never a huge fan of him. You can tell it's showing you the tie that it has to Spider-Man. This is a cool interpretation of him. I think, in my personal opinion, they did better with him in the movies, fleshed him out more as a character. But this is cool, the whole Osborn family thing. And then here's Havoc, Scott Summers' brother, Cyclops, the brother of Cyclops. And I never knew what to make of this one. I never knew Havoc much. I believe he was on the X-Force. But, this is really cool interpretation of him. But for whatever reason, his powers never resonated with me. But he's still a cool character. Very well drawn. The way they draw him here, or the way Jessica did this, almost looks evil. Definitely brought to life very well. Here's Hawkeye, with his early Avengers costume. As you guys know, he didn't have this in the movies or the series or anything like that. But, this was how Hawkeye looked. And I was never really a fan, honestly, of Hawkeye as a character too much, but I really think that the movies and the TV show and such really gave him a lot of much-needed backstory, beyond a guy that just shoots arrows. And here's Hobgoblin. I believe he's like a demon of some kind, like a true goblin, compared to the Green Goblin, which just had a costume. But I don't really know his backstory. I know he's very much in the Spider-Man universe. I believe he was in the Maximum Carnage, if I remember correctly. But then Hulk. I've never found Hulk too interesting of a character, but I really do love this interpretation. The colors themselves, look at this jade green. In the 90s when we thought Hulk, this is what we saw, His skin and his purple pants, the despite him not being a favorite character of mine, I just thought that was just so cool, how he brought him to life. That jade skin, it's just such a great look. Next we have the famous Human Torch. I always kind of liked the Fantastic Four for whatever reason. I thought they were kind of a cool team. I kind of enjoyed the movies for what they were. And orange is one of my favorite colors, so I think it's really cool. The orange and the black, it's such an awesome contrast. Great interpretation of him here. Iceman, he's definitely a cool character. I like how with Jessica's backgrounds, you don't always know like what's going on in the background. So who knows where he is here? Maybe he's near a sun or something. It's cool. It's like really kind of lights up your imagination, you know? Then Invisible Woman, Sue Storm. She was always cool. I always thought she had interesting powers, and the comic writers, I have a couple Fantastic Four comics, they always found great ways to kind of creatively use her powers. I always thought that was cool. And it was a strange casting choice to have, you know, Jessica Alba in those early films. I never saw the film that came after it, the remake. But, yeah, she was really cool. The infamous Iron Man that we all know and love. I never found him too interesting of a character, honestly. I just thought he was a man with a suit. But I thought, you know, obviously the MCU films, you know, really brought him to life. And in many ways, he's the reason, you know, that first Iron Man film was just incredible and really paved the way for the Marvel films that we know today. So I have to thank them for that. If they didn't take a chance on such a, in my opinion, not so interesting character, you know, and didn't do well with him, we wouldn't be where we are today. So I still have mad respect for Iron Man. Jean Grey. I think this is a great painting of her costume. And I love how, you know, with her telekinesis and her telepathy and such, you can't really illustrate that in a card. So I just love how creative Jesco is with the colors of the powers. I always just thought that was so cool. You know, every character, they've got a slightly different shade of, you know, colors that they use. And yeah, that's a great interpretation. Juggernaut, always kind of an interesting character to me. Definitely a very intimidating view of him. I always thought he was kind of cool. What was it, the Gem of Sidorak, I believe, that he had? And look at Kang. This is incredible. Kang was always interesting to me because you never quite knew what powers he had. And in the comics, oftentimes, you know, he doesn't technically have any powers, but because he could travel into the future, he was able to, you know, gain different types of weaponry and knowledge. And there's just an amazing color palette to me. Just so cosmic and awesome. And I know that, you know, Kang was portrayed in the latest Ant-Man film. I've been told that the actor that was to play him is no longer going to be doing so. So we'll see what bodes for the new Marvel films, if they choose to take him as a character or move forward with someone else. But yeah, definitely cool interpretation. The classic Kingpin. Again, with the atmosphere, I just love how, you know, how he's portrayed, just, you know, with the cigar and, you know, the diamond cane and how big he is. And he's like the boss. This is his city. You know, just a picture really is 1,000 words. So great interpretation of Kingpin. And Leader, don't know too much about him. I know he's really smart, as is evidenced by his very large brain, but I know he had a lot. He was tied into the Hulk universe side of things. I don't know too much about his character, but I love just like the alien technologies and how he portrays it. It's very cool. All right, we move on to Lizard. I never found him too interesting as a character, but I think this is a great interpretation of him. I think he makes a great villain for Spider-Man. So this is a cool thing of him brought to life. It's interesting with these purple pants. Everybody seems to have purple pants for whatever reason. And then we get to the ever famous Loki, portrayed so well by Tom Hiddleston. I couldn't have asked for a better interpretation. But Loki didn't always sort of have his cool, suave aesthetic that he does now. This Loki was very much kind of a crazy trickster, as you can tell by his costume. And I thought it was cool how they brought the ram horns back. But it's, the Thor universe is always so cosmic, so it's so cool that they've got the cosmic backdrop there. And then the X-Men's biggest villain, Magneto. I never quite knew how I felt about this interpretation, because you can see he's very old here. He's very much, older, like Professor Xavier is, but they don't really portray that much in the comics. In the comics, they always seem to make him look young. But I think this is an interesting take because he is older. And so I would say, I guess I'm a fan of how Jesco has done this. But, it's a great, cool thing how his powers and, the radiation of the green, again, how Jesco brings these characters to life is really, really cool. Major Victory, to be honest, I know nothing about him. But it does look like he has a Captain America-esque shield. So I'm assuming that there's some kind of a relation there. I'm not quite sure. Mandarin, the Ten Rings storyline. Very famous in the Iron Man universe. And I always thought it was cool, sort of his Asian aesthetic and bringing sort of a Far East villainry to things in the Marvel comics. Cool villain. Megan, I honestly don't know much about her, but I think this is really an amazing backdrop. Just the fantastical elements, Stonehenge, the pink moon. Jesco's colors are just great. Then the infamous Mephisto. Some may call him the devil, but he's not quite the devil, but he's often interpreted as that. Not my favorite portrayal of him, but I definitely think it goes a long way to show, his evil nature and, how he's a plotter and a planner. Pretty cool. Mojo. I always found this guy creepy. I don't know why. Infamous X-Men villain with Mojo World. And just great, creepy, gross portrayal of him. Mole Man. I think he was in the Fantastic Four universe. But I honestly don't know too much about him. I suppose that's a fitting portrayal of him from what little I know of him. Not my favorite card, but it's cool. Next we move on to Moon Knight. I know. I should have seen the series. I'm told it was very good. I'll get around to seeing it at some point. But Moon Knight is one of my favorite characters. He's definitely in the top 10 for sure. He's I don't know. he's just very cool. I like his technology, and he's sort of like a Batman with an Eastern flair in a sense. Just a cool concept for a villain, in my opinion. Morbius, the living vampire. I know they had a film about him. I told it wasn't very good. I didn't see it for myself to say, but he's okay. He's not my favorite, but I know he's been in, the Spider-Man universe for a while. Mr. Fantastic, I think this is a cool interpretation of him, fixing things as he does and showing his stretchy powers. Cool character. Mr. Sinister, I always thought he was just such a badass X-Men villain. That's a really cool portrayal of him, because you don't know what he's doing. He's lording over something. But just such cool colors with the orange and the black and the red in his eyes. He's just, he's a really cool character. Namor, I don't know his story too much. I know him and Namorita are, definitely, I believe they're in that sort of Avengers universe. Don't know much about these characters, but I think it's, again, with Jusko's environments and his colors, under the sea, deep stuff. It's really cool. I love how he makes these characters pop. Nick Fury, as many of you know, the ever-famous Samuel L. Jackson, who portrays Nick Fury. I originally thought that it was going to be sort of cheesy, but I really think that in those films, Jackson brought a great aesthetic to Nick Fury. I never found him interesting in the comics, to be honest, but I think it's cool how it portrays, with the cigar and the eye patch. So yeah, this was our 90s Nick Fury, old and chiseled. Then we move on to Nightcrawler. I would definitely say he's probably one of my top 5 favorite characters in the Marvel Universe. I love this card so much. It's one of my favorites. I just think the interpretation of his costume, the interpretation of his BAMF, his teleportation powers, how he's just coming at you. This is one of my favorite portrayals of Nightcrawler. Very, very cool. And Nightmare. I don't honestly know anything about Nightmare. I can't remember honestly much about him, so I can't really say. I mean, definitely a creepy interpretation of nightmares, whatever he's doing here. But yeah, it's a cool card. All right, then we move on to Night Thrasher. I want to say he's in the Darkhawk side of things. He may even have some ties with Moon Knight. I cannot remember. I don't know much about his character, but again, I really like how, Jusko paints the environments. There's just such a mood to each card. And then Nomad, I don't know too much about his character. I think he's got a child, clearly. I think this is meant to portray what he does. He's like on the run for something, but I don't quite sure. I don't know anything about his character, but it's not my favorite card, but it's definitely a unique card from all the other ones, making it like a wanted poster. So that's cool. This was the first Marvel card that I ever got, North Star, the first 92 Marvel Masterpiece that I ever got. And again, with these stark colors, I never knew much about Alpha Flight, but I got more interested in Alpha Flight once I kind of learned of, Wolverine's backstory and how it tied into Canada and Alpha Flight as a team. And then the famous Nova. It's so cool. I mean, I just love the whole cosmicness of Nova and the Shi'ar Empire and all of those cosmic alien races. I just thought that was such a cool thing. So this is a pretty cool card. And then Phoenix. I believe this is the Rachel Summers, the Jean Grey and Scott Summers Phoenix. This isn't the Jean Grey Phoenix, I believe. So I'm not really sure. I thought that Rachel Summers usually had long hair, so I think this is kind of a unique interpretation of her. But definitely cool contrast. I always love how he has the planets and the cosmicness of the way he paints things. Very cool. Professor X. I always liked this card, and this card was very rare in my school. If you had Professor X, that was like, whoa, what can I trade you for that one? I really love this card, just the yellowness, the pink suit. It's definitely a 90s aesthetic here with him in the Danger Room. Very rare card for me at the time, and even more rare so. No one that I knew had this was the Psylocke. I feel really, really grateful to have this because back in the day, this card was worth a lot of money. I haven't looked to see if these cards are worth anything now, but man, to have Psylocke, such a cool portrayal too. Betsy Braddock, awesome character, love her storyline. Very, very proud to have this. Punisher, I know he's had numerous films. I've honestly never seen them. Not my favorite character, but I always liked his run-ins. He had a run-in with Venom, Spider-Man. Not my favorite character, but a cool portrayal of him. Quasar, I don't know much about him. So I can't say. I mean, definitely the cosmicness of everything. I love how Jesco does that. But yeah, not my favorite character. I never really felt like digging into his character arc, but yeah, it's cool colors. I love the color scheme. We have Quicksilver, son of Magneto. I think it was Pietro Maximoff, who was portrayed. Forget the actor's name in the second Avengers film. I know for legal reasons they couldn't call him a mutant because that was something that Fox owned, but definitely cool portrayal of him, at the racetrack. Always found his little horn hair interesting. Red Skull, I always thought he was a cool character. Captain America's arch nemesis with the castle and the forebodingness and the filtered cigarette. Very much a 90s thing. And Rogue. I always thought this was a really, really cool portrayal of Rogue. This is always how I imagined her. Just like with the colors of her costume, and there's such a great stark contrast to the pink background. And once again, just like, where is she? Where is she at? That's what I love about Jesco's environments. Just so cool. And then the famous Sabretooth. I love this card. The moon is so ridiculously huge that, it doesn't make any sense. The tides would be flooding the earth if the moon was this close, but that's what I love about Marvel. It's not quite realistic, but it's such a great, awesome card. He's so evil looking with the contrast of the moon and the freezing. He's probably in Canada or something like that. Very cool card. And then we move on to Sandman. He's always an interesting character to me in the Spider-Man universe. Really cool portrayal of him there. I like the bright colors. I love that Jesco does that. And then we have Sauron, infamous, what was the, not the Lost World. I forget the name of it, the place that was out of time on the Earth. But, definitely famous in the X-Men world. Shadowcat. She was within the X-Men universe, I think. Was it her that had, was it ties with Colossus? Or am I thinking of a different villain? Or hero, rather. But definitely cool portrayal. Makes you wonder where she's at. If it's like a secret lab or the danger room or something. And then Shatterstar. I always thought he was an interesting character, within Mojo's world. Kind of in that cosmic area of things. Then She-Hulk. I know they had a She-Hulk adaptation series. I never did see it, but it's so cool how Jusko does metal. It's like there's that jade green skin again. And the portrayal of metal, it's always so shiny, and this is like very much a 90s like swimsuit aesthetic. Silver Sable. I know that she was in Nick Fury's camp. I don't know too much about her. She had some run-ins with Spider-Man, I believe. But definitely cool card. Just love how they have the silver and the costume and, the bubbly champagne. It's, he always sets a great atmosphere. This is probably my favorite card in this series, only because I'm biased. Silver Surfer is my favorite Marvel character of all time, and I just love how they portray him. It's like ripping him right out of the comics. I always loved how cosmic. I mean, he had the power cosmic. I mean, Silver Surfer just really, just one of my favorite character, and I love Jusko's portrayal here. Just a great card. I love this card. And the character Sleepwalker, I don't know too much about this guy, but I do love the colors, the stark color contrast here. There's so much with the purples and the blues, just it pops against the green. I don't know how he does that. Such a great colored card, in my opinion. Speedball. I'm not sure about this character. I don't know much about him. I know he could have like these energy balls or something that he could project, but I never really had him in any of the comics that I have, so I don't know too much about him. I love this card as well. When I was growing up, Spider-Man was one of my favorite superheroes, and I felt that I related to him. He always had trouble with the girl. It was always hard for him to get through school and getting his job and dealing with all normal life problems and then the problems as Spider-Man. But to me, I loved this interpretation. It was like they pulled him right out of the comics and put him in 3D. And I love that it's simple too, that, against just a black background, because it's Spider-Man. You don't need anything else. So such a cool card in my opinion. And she's not one of my favorite characters, but this is also an amazing card in my opinion. I love this card of Storm. It's such a great portrayal of her powers. Such a moody, dark, card. You know, I remember when I got this card when I was in grade school, I was like, man, this is such a cool card. You know, rolling up the seas with the winds and the lightning. Just a very well done card. Strong guy. I believe he was in X Factor, maybe. I think the guy's name was Guido. I don't know much about him. I did have a figure of him when I was younger, an action figure that was gifted to me for Christmas. So that's really cool. Super Skrull, very famous as you can see, using the Fantastic Four powers. Love the classic backdrop. I just think it's I love what Jesco does with colors. Not a huge fan of the Skrulls. I think their storyline's kind of cool with the Secret Wars and things like that, but it's a cool card. This is also one of my favorite cards. Again, due to bias. Thanos, the ever-famous Thanos from the Avengers films. But before he was in the movies, he was always like the ultimate badass in the comics. And I love what Jesco does here. It's like he's basically standing on these planets. I mean, that's how powerful he's become. And I love the colors and the cosmicness of it. And Thanos was just always such a cool, intimidating character. I love this card. And then on to Thing. I always found this card to be very plain, but it still is a good portrayal of what Thing is like. Again, great use of colors. You know, the blue eyes against the stark brown of his rocky skin. That's really cool. Thor, you know, before Thor was Chris Hemsworth, he was the long-haired metal album-looking guy that you see here. There's Asgard and with the Rainbow Bridge. It was portrayed quite literally in the comics. But yeah, it's so cool with the cosmicness of it. I like this card. Tombstone. I don't know too much about him. I believe he's in the Spider-Man universe. But I don't know. It's interesting with his skin. I always love how Marvel does skin colors, especially the way Joe Jesco portrays them. I mean, it's like very just evil, and he's great at that. He's great at interpretations. The famous Ultron from, obviously from the second Avengers film, portrayed so wonderfully by James Spader. But the first Spider-Man comic that I ever had was of Ultron. Spider-Man and Ultron was in the comic. So that was kind of my first exposure to him. I think he's a really cool villain. I think how he reinvents himself, and he's a very formidable villain in the comics, and I think he's portrayed well here. Venom. I think Venom's one of my favorite villains. He's got like a creepiness to him. He's really badass. He's really strong. And I think how they do his face here is great. But he's missing his nasty tongue. And for some reason, I always found him to be a little stocky in this card. Everything is great here, but I think it's like his legs are pushed too far into his body for some reason. But still a very, very cool realization of him. Weapon Omega. I honestly know nothing about this character. I believe that Weapon Omega was part of Alpha Flight, but that is all I know. about this card. White Queen. She, just a cool X-Men villain. The Hellfire Club. I love how it's portrayed, very luxurious lifestyle, and sitting against the piano or whatever is back here. Just a great, cool environment that Jesco portrays. And then here we go, the famous Wolverine. This was a card that I lusted after, and when I got it, I could not believe it. I was over the moon. I love the atmosphere of this portrayal of Wolverine. One, him not having his mask, and he looks so wild and feral. He looks like a beast, and the comics never quite portrayed him this way. But I just think how crazy his hair is, and just the Canadian wilderness here with the mountains. It's the colors against the backdrop. It's such an amazing interpretation, in my opinion. I love this card very much, and this portrayal of Wolverine. Wonder Man. I don't know much about him, but I know he's got something to do with the Avengers. I believe he may have been killed, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure if it was him or someone else, but I think he may have died. But again, with Jesco's colors, it's like so amazing with the orange backdrop, and it's definitely a very 90s wrestler kind of aesthetic here. He's got like a what's that guy's name from Baywatch? Very 90s here. All right, we are starting to close out here. These were the cards that back in the day when I was a kid and I would go to my local video store to buy one of these cards. They were anywhere between $30 to $60 a piece. And when I was able to get this whole collection of these cards, I was just over the moon. I couldn't believe it. I just kind of sat there for half an hour just looking at them. Again, just amazingly portrayed by Jesco. And it's hard to see here, but these are kind of holographic. It's difficult to see through the plastic, but if you get a chance to see these cards in person, they're really, really cool. And these are the great villain hero matchups. And here with Captain America and Red Skull, the very famous battle, the ultimate battle in the universe, Silver Surfer versus Thanos. I love this. Such a cool, it's like it's just coming right out of the comic, And then there's the very famous Spider-Man and Venom. And that's what I find interesting is Venom's got his nasty tongue here, and he looks a little more proportional. So I wonder what was different about Jesco's interpretation of this one compared to the previous card of him. But then Thing vs. Hulk. I honestly don't remember this in the comics very much, but I still think it's so cool, them fighting with the interesting backdrop. It makes you wonder, where are they? And this was the one everyone coveted. Everyone that I knew that was into Marvel cards wanted this card. This is such an amazing portrayal of Wolverine versus Sabretooth. This was just larger than life. You were the cool kid if you had this. And I was not the cool kid. But I've got it now, so now I feel like the cool kid. The classic battle, Wolverine versus Sabretooth. And then finally, here in the original set, we have the checklist of all the cards. And one thing I didn't mention is that each one of these cards has a backstory when you pull it out. But there's so many cards here that I didn't want to take up too much time. And so I didn't want to go through all that individually. But in the back of this checklist, it shows you all the cards. And that's how I knew I had the entire set when I had bought this from a seller. He included the checklist with it. And I have every single card that's on this. So that makes me incredibly, incredibly happy. And lastly, we have these cards. From what I understand, these are incredibly rare. These were cards, I'm not quite sure the backstory, I don't know if they were misprints or afterprints or rare printings. I'm not quite sure. But these were ones that were not a part of the original set. So they're considered rare from what I understand. We have Scarlet Witch, Magneto's daughter, the sister of Quicksilver. Has a very Transylvanian kind of appearance to it. She's not really showing her powers here, but it's still a cool card. We have Feral. I believe Feral was with Cable on the X-Force. Again, it's a very kind of crazy card. I don't quite know what's happening here behind the moon, but again, Jessica's portrayal of the moon, just really incredible. Deathbird. This was, who was the leader of the Shi'ar Empire? The name is escaping me. The wife of Professor X. Lilandra. This was Lilandra's evil sister, Deathbird. I always thought it was cool, the avian race that they were. And then we have the famous Jubilee. I always liked her interpretation in the X-Men show. I feel like this card is a little goofy, but I still love the yellow, the yellow trench coat, the jean shorts, and the boots. This was very much a 90s kind of interpretation. But definitely happy to have this card because I know this was one of the most rare, if not the most rare, in these entire sets here. And then lastly, we have the villain Typhoid Mary. I know that she was very much in the Spider-Man universe, a villain there. I believe she was involved with Daredevil pretty heavily as well, and Elektra, if I'm not mistaken. But I wanted to thank you all for taking this journey with me here to take a look at this amazing Marvel 1992 Marvel Masterpieces set. It's my favorite set of any masterpieces that have been released, and I know there's been a great many series, but this one always holds a special place in my heart. And when you covet something when you're young and you get older and you're able to finally get it, it's a really satisfying feeling. So thank you guys again for joining me here on ASM Hour. I hope you like this content that I've started. And if you like what I'm doing, feel free to like and subscribe. Click that notification bell, and you'll be notified when I release more content. Again, thanks for going on this journey with me through memory lane, and I hope to see you in the next video. Take care, and peace be with you.